Hello friends, welcome back to the video series in Oracle PL SQL programming. Whenever we have created the table, we now need to insert the data into the table. But when we have to insert the data must be validated. Such as when we want to insert any data in the age field, it must be number and not negative. And when suppose we want to insert data into the employee table, first name must not be null. Such as employee ID for each employee must be unique. Unique means two employees cannot have the same employee ID. So putting all together these things in mind, we can apply the constraints in the table. Constraint is a rule to which data must conform. Constraint names are optional. Constraint can be enabled or disabled or dropped. Constraint can be added at the column level or table level. So, constraint is nothing but a validator which validates the inserted data to the table. If the inserted data follow the rules provided by the user using constraint, would be allowed in the table, otherwise would be rejected. When using the constraint, we can specify the name of the constraint or not. When we are providing any name to the constraint, it would be easier to enable or disable it further. Otherwise, Oracle would provide any name to the constraint implicitly. We can also drop any constraint. Practically, we can enable or disable any constraint as per our requirement. If any constraint is disabled and we need to enable it for any particular job at any particular time, we can use the enable keyword to enable it. Now, constraint can be added through column level or through the table level. Particularly when we are creating any table, we are creating the columns with their names and data types. During this creation, if we want to add any particular constraint to any particular column, it will be a column level constraint. But if we want to add the constraints after creation of the table with a list of columns with respective constraints, then that would be the table level. There is an added advantage through table level. When we adding constraint through column level, only one constraint can be added to only one column. But through table level, we can add single constraint to multiple columns. Let's check what are the basic constraints available to work with. Not null, unique, primary key, check, and the foreign key. So these are the major constraints. Let's check them individually. Not null. This constraint is for that particular field or column where there must be no null value or blank. So this constraint always ensures for that particular field always some value must be passed. Such as in the employee table, the name of the employee must be there. So the first name column must be not null, and we can add this constraint with this column. Unique. This constraint always ensures the uniqueness of any particular record, such as the email ID in the employee table must be unique for each employee. So we can add this constraint unique to the email ID field in the employee table. Primary key. This constraint best describe any particular record. When using primary key, by default, it is also not null and unique, such as In the employee table, EMP ID or employee ID is always not null and must be unique. So we can use the primary key constraint with this particular column. But we have to remember one thing. Any particular table can contain only one primary key. More precisely, only one column can be associated with the primary key in the complete table. Now the check. This constraint is to check the incoming value to the field of any particular type. Suppose in the gender column of employee table, we want to pass only single character M or F, etc. Instead of the complete word, we can use the check constraint here. Suppose in the salary column, we don't want to input salary less than 10,000. We can use the check constraint here to make check during input. And finally, the foreign key. Particularly, this constraint is a part of the referential integrity. Suppose we have two tables, employee and department. So which employee is working on which department, we can use this foreign key for referential integrity with the department table. So these 5 constraints are the measure used in SQL. In the next videos, we would work on these constraints individually.